Hey guys, I got a new phone. So this is kind of like a test run to see how this is gonna do, and also, I've been kind of like putting off fucking making this video because I was debating on how I was gonna do it, and I was gonna do like a 4 minute kind of quick thing, or make it like a multiple topic video, do like 20 plus minutes or whatever. But I decided that I'm gonna go with a single topic here, maybe two. It depends on how I feel after I get to the end of the first. And uh, and then go from there, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, you had to get myself in the right mindset as well. So I went back, did a little bit of digging on the last upload I did, and there's not a lot of comments, but some decent feedback that, of course, spiraled into me making this one. Now, I think the first one that kind of like piqued my attention here, like, oh well, maybe I should talk about this, was a question from 91 B20DA. Now I have a suspicion of who I think this might be, but anyway, because I think it might be the same guy I talked to on Instagram. I'm not 100% sure. And then so the question was, what's your take on stock FRM sleeves making over 700 horsepower? I'm not going to say exactly what I said there. If you want to go just read through the comments, it's not a lot. You'll find it pretty easy. And I think it was a loaded question. I think it was, that's a very specific number for a very specific kind of engine block. And I asked that, and I got the answer like, yeah, that's, it was. So I'm pretty sure you know who he's talking about. If you know who he's talking about, maybe you understand why it's significant to me in particular, and why I think it's a loaded question. But I'm going to answer that, in a more broad spectrum, and not just on because of whose build that is that he's talking about there. And then also, Jeffrey Morgano graced us with his presence on the video, and he gave, see, and this is one of the good things sometimes. This is why I want to be close to the big guys in the industry. It's not about yes, I fanboy, but I fanboy over these people because the knowledge carried through so much time and and effort and putting in all these fucking builds. Well, that's why when people talk to me like, oh, Chris is fucking gurus, a Honda guru. Like, no, I'm not. No, these guys are. These guys are fucking awesome. All right, and this is the reason why I want to know these people and be cool with all these people, because the information that you get, and a lot of these guys are way more articulate than I am, and they have a way better time explaining things, or way better, or better, easier to explain things in better detail than I can ever. Sometimes I'm just like, somebody asks me a question, I'm like, no, this isn't a great idea, and I give an answer, a reason, but it's never as well as put out as sometimes I think as it should be. And Jeff came in and he filled in on some things. Also, I'm not going to quote him directly because he left a big comment, but I'm going to just take apart a couple things from it to help talk about what I was talking about here in this video. Also, I think somebody deleted a comment. There's another comment that was left on here that I can't find, and because there's not a lot of comments on here, it's very suspiciously missing. So I think the guy deleted it because of the reply he got. It wasn't a nasty reply, but I think it was just one of those things that he was like, well, that was maybe not the best idea. So anyway, so I think maybe Hunter Tuned. I'm not 100% sure there. I think it is him. He did like a decon. I think it is a block filler for a B20 or whatnot. And somebody says, I'm like, oh, this guy did that, and, it did fine. And then another guy replied, it was like, yeah, it cracked the sleeves or whatnot. So there was that. He was using that guy as an example, and then of course that guy's block it popped. Now I don't know the details behind the block. I don't know how long it ran or how high the power levels were. But this is where I'm very appreciative of Jeffrey coming in and having a better detailed explanation for why exactly these things aren't the best. And also his last chunk of his comment is leading into what I'm going to talk about here in depth. Hopefully it's in depth. I don't know, because I'm already talking more than I thought I would without actually being on the topic. So he's like, okay, so talk about block fillers here, like the epoxies and whatnot. He's like, you also have to think about longevity. Antifreeze tends to break down all the epoxy fillers I've seen over an extended period of time. So when you see success stories, and I will put these goddamn quotations on here, success stories, which there are many you need to know. So when you see success stories, which there are many, you need to see how many are running it for years at high horsepower levels. I think you'll find, as I have, that not many are, not many are, because the epoxy starts to crack and lose its adhesion to the walls. So the whole thing about reinforcing your cylinder walls is the fact that it has to be touching, you know, the outer part of the block and bracing against the cylinder sleeves or the cylinder walls, and that's what makes the extra rigidity. And if antifreeze is starting to get through there and it's starting to lose that, and it's starting to, you know, break down a little bit, or start to lose its grip, then it's losing its reinforcing properties, right? Now the end of part of it is like this: is that when you talk about, in the end, epoxy filler has been around way longer than the CSS, and you don't see hundreds and thousands of 700. Hundreds and thousands of 700, 800, 900 horsepower BK, HF, and D series blocks running epoxy. But you do see that many CSS blocks making those numbers. Coincidence? I think not. And I love that, because that ending statement right there that was placed after, I think the whole 700 horsepower FRM block was posted like one of the first comments, and then a couple days later Jeffrey posted that. And that is why I'm kind of happy I didn't rush to make this video, because that right there directly feeds back into my exact point that I was going to make about the FRM, you know, 700 horsepower situation, you know. I think this is definitely a situation of can versus should. Not only that, but also another thing with case study, you know. I don't know how many fucking guys are going to stumble across this, or how many of my watchers, you know, actually are into MMA or anything like that. But if you're tracking anything recently with the end of the year, the card shakeup, UFC 232, and John Jones' situation with pissing hot for steroids. Now, whether you go with what the UFC and USADA and Jeff Nowitzki were saying, or whether you think that's a load of horseshit, is not the important thing here. The important thing is that another channel that I'll give a shout out to is an MMA channel that's small but great content when he releases stuff. Is Mixed Molly Whoppery. And he's also saying, kind of like from my situation standpoint, I'm not the foremost expert on this. You know, I'm not an expert on this, but I can look at this based off of what I know, based off of what I can see, and based off of what I can research, and make a decently somewhat informed, you know, view on this. And what he was saying, you know, what Jeff Nowitzki said on Joe Rogan's podcast about how, you know, John being, you know, pissing hot and pissing clean and pissing hot again is, you know, it's possible from his original ingestion of steroids a year and a half ago, is based off of a study. Now, when people hear that, people hear, oh, well, somebody studied this and somebody researched this, so this is what we've got results off of a case study already. What he didn't say was that the case study was one person. It was one person that was under the study, and it was a short period of time, and he was also 50 years old. So now, you know, your age has to play with your metabolism, right? So your body, as it gets older, slows things down, right? So what he was saying is, if you're pissing hot for this amount of time, well, you're an old person, and it takes a longer time for you to get it out of your body than, say, a younger person would, right? And it was only one person the case study was made on. This is why you have multiple people in the study to prove things. You can find a number like, you know, 5 out of 10 people had it this long, 8 out of 10 people had it this long. Then when you start getting into the bigger numbers, there's more people doing it, then you can have a better idea of what results are to be expected. Now, that's why, you know, a long time ago I made the first discussion video, like how much horsepower you can make on a stock block, you know, how much power you can squeeze out of it on a safe, indefinite, long-term period. And generally speaking, real quick, this is like 350 horsepower for a stock B series. Now, yes, people are making 400 plus on that, but when you have 350 below, there's a whole lot less chance of a failure, right? As long as the engine is relatively healthy, or healthy when you're going to do what you're going to do to add power to it. So, you know, that's, you know, when you see a lot of people doing that successfully for years, then you can make that as case study. You know, that's a case study you can say this is why we say that this is reliable. And the reason why I present the things the way I do for you guys on this channel is because I am always thinking about this from the young enthusiast or the broke enthusiast who is 9 out of 10 times modifying his only car. Like, this is my daily driver. This is the only car I have. If something happens to this, I'm fucked. Right? Now, I've also said several times, if you want to experiment, you want to push things, you want to try out something, hey, let me just do this because I just want to see what it can do, and I have multiple cars, you know, or if this car blows up, it's not a big deal, then yeah, I'm all for that. I do crazy, stupid shit like that all the time. I had me a little scare with my K20 the other day because the rods were looking with like I seated the bearings in the rod, and I was having a lot of extra meat on the rod. I'm like, well, that's fucking weird. I've never seen that before. I've never also done a forged K build. I've only ever done the stock K. So then I start looking into it. I can't really find it. I started digging through Instagram to see all these engine builders and all these rods are put together, and I finally found something that's similar. And then plus on top of that, I measured clearances once I had bolted everything down. So the whole point on that being, like, you know, even though I was a little bit sketchy on it before I was able to confirm that, you know, everything seems to be all right, I was on that mentality where I was like, just send it. You know, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if something happens to it, it's not that big a deal. But see, not everybody can be that way. You know, people need things to work a certain way because this is the only car they got or whatnot. So that's why I try to present things like what you can do on a healthy standpoint. And there's always those people who come out and be like, well, this guy did that. You know, this guy did that. Okay, well, that's fine. But you don't know how long that's going to last. You know, like, okay, so even the other day, and going back to that discussion where I had where, you know, I was talking with Kenny and shit, and I made mention of like, oh, like, you know, like a 500 horsepower, you know, K-Series, and you dial it back down for the safety. And then he hit me real quick with oh, we do that for the trans. Like, well, man, you know, of course, I'm not trying to argue that point. I was just using that as an example. But even then, it kind of triggered something. And I'm like, well, dude, that's fine. You know, I have another guy, like a friend that builds high horsepower Ks all the time. And he was like, well, stock rods are good for like 600 horsepower. Like, yeah, but I also know that a lot of these guys that are out here racing those kind of engines, they pop. They pop regularly. The whole point of that, you know, 600 horsepower on a stock K is the fact that you can get those blocks, you know, for a couple $100 and then make that huge power, go out there and hurt feelings for a while, and then if it blows up, you throw it away and you get another $300 block. It's not a big deal. The blocks are selling for $250 nowadays. So that's why, you know, it's okay for these guys to do that, because, you know, just because you hit 600 horsepower on the dyno with that fucking block doesn't mean that's just going to last long. You know, and then of course you're shortening that every time you're racing, right? Now, you can have a 500 horsepower stock K or whatnot, and it lasts you for years because you rarely raced it. You rarely got on it. Like you drove that car. Like, okay, so if you daily drove that car, let's say you just did like a third gear pull or fourth gear pull on somebody every once in a while, versus somebody who's out there on the track on a regular basis or taking it to hangouts on a regular basis that are racing it a lot. And the problem is when you go on those big, when you go high on those big numbers like that, generally speaking, when you have a fucking failure, it's catastrophic. It's not just, you know, I spun a bearing, I got a rod knock. It's like I dropped the valve, the head's chewed to pieces, the cylinders are chewed to pieces, or I launched a rod through the block and now I got a hole in the block. So that's why when I talk about the things I do, I always try to make, you know, like 500 horsepower be that cap for stock sleeves, and you know, in like the 350 horsepower range for B series and stuff like that, you know, for stock rods and stuff. I mean, you can do so much, so you can make so much power off of just a piston rod combo that's why, you know, and it's not really that expensive anymore. And there's ones you can get out there that are super budget friendly that'll make good power. That's why I always just recommend certain things. I always go back to those certain recommendations. So, you know, talking about, you know, 700 horsepower on a stock H22 block, you know, I'm not hating against it. I'm not saying it can't be done. It probably can be done. It's been done. These guys have done it, you know. But at the same time, how many people have done this? What's the circumstances and situations the car's being driven, and how long do they last? Now, I think that it's like another outside the Honda world thing, you know, like Ben Shapiro when he's talking about it. And I'm not saying whether I advocate for the guy's conversations or against it, but it's a good example. If you've heard his arguments, he goes like, you know, talk about things with like friggin' abortion or whatnot, right? He's like, your argument for why this is the way it should be is you take the extreme and present that as this is why, but that doesn't happen very often. So, you know, these guys successfully did 700 horsepower on a stock sleeve block, you know, that being the outlier and then using that for all the scenarios. And I think that's a bad thing. Now, I'm not saying that maybe this is the new norm. Maybe a whole bunch of people from now on start doing 700 horsepower stock sleeves. But, you know, like the reason why I'm so happy that, you know, Jeff hit on this, you know, video like the way he did is when he said it. Hundreds and thousands of cases where this is successful versus one, versus a dozen, I think that that's what when you want to start looking for something and saying that this can be done, you want to start looking for hundreds of scenarios at the minimum. You're like, hundreds of people are doing this, then that's something I feel safe going back into and saying that, and like, trying to be informative, even if, like I'm saying, like, if you don't agree with me, at least use the same methods that I'm trying to talk about, and then you can go out there yourself and find it your own way. Yeah, that's just really, I guess, that's really it. It can be done. I say, 500 horsepower on a K series, I wouldn't mind, doing it. I'd do it. I probably will do it in the future or whatnot. And I know that there's a lot of people out there doing it. I've said it before. Now, but I also feel like anything beyond like 550, man, you're really starting to push it, and it's also depending on how you're driving the car. If you're trying to build something that you're wanting to really beat on, forged pistons and rods isn't that big a deal to put into that block. Same thing with like a stock B series. I mentioned before, stock B series sleeves, or even in this freaking video I talked about it. Stock B series sleeves, 500 horsepower, do some kind of reinforcement on your cylinders. And like, well, these guys are making 600 horsepower on stock sleeves or whatnot. He was like, yeah, but more often than not, the norm is people start to do CSS or whatnot after 500 horsepower, because it's every time you do a pass or whatnot, every time you push it, you're limiting. You don't know, it's like a cat life. You're taking one away before it gives up on you. And me personally, I would like to drive my car knowing that there's far less of a chance of it giving out, than instead of going out driving and be like, is it going to give out this time? Not knowing for sure. So I guess yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Then I want to wrap it up there. I kind of touched on what I was thinking about talking about with the K. I just not really going into it. If you are kind of curious or whatnot, like I said, I put the bearing in the rod, and I had a decent amount of overlap from the rod, like it was showing a decent amount of rod meat left over. And I was like, well, I know for a fact that I have the right fucking bearings, and the rod, it sits in the journal space. So I was like, well, I guess the only way I'm really going to know is that I just bolt down the entire assembly, like line everything up, bolt it in, rings or whatnot, spin it, see if I got play or if it jams up. It didn't jam up, and then I also took some filler gauges and ran it, and I have side clearance of around 8,000, so I'm going to send it. But at the same time, too, it's just one of those things where if something were to happen, it has enough free space and movement in there, and I did see, was it King's Racing or King's Performance had posted up a picture of a bearing, and I also saw in that rod the same kind of situation that I was looking at. I was like, all right, well, here is at least one other place that I can see that is also the same situation I'm dealing with here, and the clearances seem to be okay, so that's why I'm going to send it. Anyway, the shame is the block is assembled now. If you haven't already seen on Instagram or whatnot, well, I know you can't see really right there. It's assembled, but of course I'm still focusing on the other car before that's going to go. I need to get the ARP head studs before I can bolt the head onto it, and I might be taking apart another one of the Ks soon to strip off some accessory stuff to throw on there. But who knows, man? You never really know with me when the hell I'm going to drop it in. It could be a month or so. It could be longer. Another one of those things where I was thinking of considering, like, oh, should I just hit you guys with a surprise or whatnot for the Integra is it's all together. Everything I need to do to turn the thing on is now set up. The wiring harnesses, this should be 100% ready to go to turn on. Batteries, it's been sitting in the car for 2 years without juice, so I'm gonna try and jump it and see if that works. Yeah, so I want to see about the next couple of days or whatnot, dumping the oil in the damn engine and jumping putting the jumper cables to it and see if I can't crank it over. But I guess the thing that's contingent on is me getting my base map for the S300 or the Honda, or see if I can find another ECU I got laying around the stock or whatever, just to crank it on. Of course, the car's still got a fucking ass ton of work before it's roadworthy, but the important thing would be that the engine is actually turned on and it runs. And then I'll go from there. Once I have that done, then I just got to do the turbo kit and the axles or whatnot, and then send it to the dyno. All right, guys. So yeah, it's got to wind up being a long video anyway, kind of long-winded, but yeah. Oh, okay. I got one thing I'll throw in here at the last minute. Still a lot of questions about, hey, I want to shoot this idea by you, or hey Chris, you know, commenting in the videos, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? If you're new to the channel, go through the playlist, or you know, use that navigation video at the very top of the thing. You know, that'll help you try and find some things. But generally speaking, all my opinions on the most frequently asked questions are on the channel already, and I don't like to sit and go through and dig out links for you guys. It's a long time, and a lot of people ask the same thing. So just do me a favor, please. I'm not trying to stonewall you. I try to give everybody that comments at least one answer, because I know it's important to you guys. You know, it's important that like you get some feedback. Hey, you know, I'm a part of this community. You guys are a part. I see everybody's comments or whatnot. But just sometimes, you know, I give you a little bit, and then you keep going with some of the stuff, and like if I stop answering you, it's because I've already talked about it. Generally speaking, if you hit me with a good question that I haven't covered, I will do something like this. I'll make an upload on it. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and peace.